Welcome to Martin, Sieff and Pelle Neroth Taylor podcast, Capitals Uncovered. We've got a special edition today. As you know, we specialize in investigative journalism and exposing the truths behind the scenes. You watch this because you'll emerge with greater understanding of the world than you would otherwise. And we also sometimes we take a historical deep dive and look at unsolved mysteries and unsolved issues which the history books have either skated over or frankly misinformed us. It's all about getting to the truth, finding out what's really going on and what really has gone on. Well, one mystery which to my mind was never resolved, but I didn't think too much about it. I mean, if we don't, we go mad, I think, if we kind of had to have clarity on everything. So you just sort of abandon it, you know. But anyway, I just want to bring your minds back to the London of 1888, where in the fog-shrouded alleys of Whitechapel, a killer emerged from the shadows and etched his name into the darkest corners of history. Jack the Ripper, of course, is the person I'm talking to. He brutally murdered 5 women in a single autumn. He was never caught, and his identity remains one of the most great unsolved mysteries of the Victorian era and indelibly associated with London of that time. It has stimulated numerous imaginations, not least that of my co-host, Martin Sieff. For over 130 years, amateur sleuth historians and conspiracy theorists, I hate that word, have dissected every clue, letter, and police report in search of the truth. This has resulted in a huge amount of wild speculation and enduring theories that serve to captivate us even today. Reminds me a bit of the whole Palmer story, which I've been engaged in. So, was Jack the Ripper a deranged surgeon practicing his craft on the streets, a respected royal physician protecting a scandal at the highest levels of society, or was he just a deranged immigrant? Martin, you think you have the solution to this story. Well, tell us a little bit about what you found, because I know that you followed this story for a very long time.
Well, I walked the streets of Whitechapel, more in search of good delicatessens and good Indian eateries than in the Ripper's footsteps decades ago. There are Ripper tours, which are great fun, and the standard of scholarship in them is very good too. There is that. But basically, I am here to shoot down every widespread assumption that you have just made, Pelle. First of all, I am not going to be talking about speculations. I'm going to be talking about facts. I'm going to be talking about, and the case was not unsolved. It was solved by the police at the time. The 2 or 3 top police officers involved in the investigation made quite clear in their memoirs and unpublished papers at the time, which often were not fully accessed to the public or discovered by researchers till 80 or 90 years later. But they were under no doubt about who the primary suspects were. Prosecutions were not brought for a reason. The Ripper was caught. That was why the killing stopped. They didn't have evidence to do it, and there were other serious political reasons why it was not exposed. The royal family had nothing to do with it whatsoever. There were no conspiracies in high places. There was no fabulous surgeon. You pointed out among your alternatives what the correct solution was. He was a deranged immigrant. And his own immigrant community, terrified of general pogroms and riots against them. Most of them didn't know about it, but the family themselves covered it up. And the one witness who did identify him to the police refused to testify. The police at the time did not fail. Scotland Yard and the London Metropolitan Police actually solved the case in record time. How they did it is an example in excellent common sense and procedural police work that we should still study and admire to this day. The police were not incompetent. There is no significant sign of collapse in morale in the London police afterwards, which is hugely significant as well, because the police did not feel they had failed. And as we will see, they had not failed. Who was the Ripper? Well, again, in all these shows, people will tease you with this and say, first of all, they'll keep you watching for an hour or 3 hours or 6 hours. And then they'll say, as you said, well, we will never know. No, you can know. And it's not me telling you, it's the most serious scholars. This was a conclusion reached by probably the most preeminent ripperologist, an eminent professor of regular history as well, the late and sadly lamented, he had a good long full life, but we miss him still, Professor Martin Fido. And he, in fact, pointed out the most likely killer, later on revised his views somewhat, but I will argue here that the primary identification he pioneered back in the 1970s and maintained ever since was the correct one. And let us give you the name right now. You see, I'm not teasing you for 30 minutes or 2 hours and then saying, oh, we will never know. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Oh, it was the Duke of Clarence. No, it wasn't the Duke of Clarence. Oh, it was the Freemasons. No, it wasn't the Freemasons. Oh, it was Sir William Gull, the great surgeon. No, it wasn't. Oh, Whitechapel was full of Freemasons carefully working with tape measures to work out mathematically secret black magic Kabbalistic grids so that the murders could be carried out on specific spots. That's absolute nonsense. It's fantasy. It's real. It's idiotic. But this is also an example in how the human mind and a human society, we don't need big bad conspiracy theorists or deep staters to do it. We brainwash ourselves. We believe what we want to believe. Everybody wants to believe that Jack the Ripper is the way David Warner plays him in the wonderful movie Time After Time with Murray Stein, Bogan, and I think Terence Stamp. No, no, it wasn't Terence Stamp. Anyway, someone can look that up for me. But no, David Warner plays him, a very fine British actor, now sadly lost to us, played a villain in one of the Star Trek spin-offs as well. No, he played the classic version we see of Jack the Ripper as a tall, dignified gentleman, very sinister, wearing a top hat and a coat like Professor Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes. Right? The rich and powerful preying on the innocent. Well, Whitechapel in 1888 was one of the most densely populated corners of Earth. It had a higher population density than any city in China, the Middle East, or Hong Kong. And virtually all those, there were a few toffs walking around there looking for easy pickings. Most of them were not. If you were looking to get a prostitute, you would not go to the East End. You would be certain to get syphilis that would not be treated at all, or would be only treated extremely badly. Afterwards, it was asking for trouble. If you had any disposable income, point one, and therefore you dressed as a top, as a gentleman, you did not go to Whitechapel. Second, no, but the Whitechapel didn't, the killer, the Ripper, did not stand out. Why did he not stand out? Because he looked like everybody else who was around there at the time. Third, modern British and American serious police analysts have studied this case and applied our most modern analytical tools to it, and they are right. They are correct in the conclusions they come to. And the first and obvious conclusion they come to is one that the much maligned British Metropolitan Police came to in 1895. If I can pull out my reference here, I don't usually quote directly because it interrupts the flow. I paraphrase and then tell people to go back. Maybe we'll have to do that here. But there is a quote from Sir Robert Anderson, Assistant Commissioner of Police at the time, and in full total overall charge of the Ripper investigations. He made it a point not to comment publicly on this case or other sensitive cases or cases where there were legal complexities or ambiguities. And here the legal issues were not that the Ripper escaped through a loophole or what have you. We shall see what there were serious issues involved. The Ripper died insane, and he died before he could be prosecuted, would likely not be prosecuted for serious reasons anyway, as I shall explain. But Sir Robert Anderson says at the time, and I will paraphrase somewhat here, but it's important. He said, and this is in 1895, he's writing a private note which was not published and which emerged decades, generations later. But there's no question about its provenance. And he's talking about events only 7 years before that time. He says, we know who the Ripper was. And he was a Polish Jew. He was called Kosminski. There was later confusion as to whether the name was Kosminski or David Cohen or Nathan Kaminsky. And this, in fact, is an issue which isn't that blurred, in which excellent modern historians like Tom Holland and mainstream historians like Tom Holland and Dominic Sandbrook, two outstanding modern figures who, to my great jealousy but also admiration, get vastly larger viewing figures on their podcasts than we do. But I recommend you to watch their podcasts on anything. And if they ever bother discovering us, I hope they will give us at least a modicum of respect. They point out clearly, why is the name David Cohen used by the police then and later, and by Anderson and others? Because the term David Cohen is a very common Jewish name, and it was used as the British police equivalent of John Doe today. Somebody who is anonymous, or somebody whose actual name and identity we're not certain of, but we know this fellow was a Jewish immigrant, and he spoke Yiddish and what have you, and was circumcised and was clinically insane. So we refer to him as David Cohen. Now, for a long period of time, the identity of the Ripper seems to have been identified. I bought this, I won't say swallowed, because there was solid evidence for it, or appeared. A fellow called Aaron Kosminski, a Jewish immigrant who came to Britain in his early 20s, in the early 1870s or early 1880s, and he fits very much the profile of the Ripper. But as more recent scholars show, there are problems with this. Kosminski is clearly documented as having been insane and being put in a lunatic asylum called Coney Hatch, and he dies there. But he isn't arrested until 1891, more than 2.5 to 3 years after the killings are carried out and after the killings stop. And although the police officers at the time, Anderson in particular, is and Chief Inspector Donald Swanson, who was his top analyst and director of investigations on the crime, the two most senior police officers who were involved in this. Both Anderson writes this in his memoirs, and Swanson has a copy of the memoirs which he privately scribbled on his own notes and comments, largely in agreement. And they are both in agreement that the Ripper died shortly after he was captured and caught, but not prosecuted and put in a lunatic asylum. Now, this does not fit Kosminski. Kosminski lived another 30 years. He died at the age of 54 in that same asylum in 1919. But it is almost impossible. I would rule it out. And of course, not being a professional historian, I can afford to shoot from the hip and be proven wrong more easily. But it is inconceivable that the two most senior police officers involved in the case, only 7 years after it ended, would have made such a fundamental mistake on facts as saying the Ripper was arrested, but he's still alive. No, they say he was arrested, he died soon afterwards. This does not fit Kosminski. It does fit, however, Nathan Kaminsky, Kaminski, and he, I believe, I maintain, in my opinion, what little it is worth, was the Ripper. And you'll find an excellent, long, actually more rambling even than I am, because I have the time to go into it, but well worth watching study and discussion of this by the eminent historians, bless them, Tom Holland and Dominic Sandbrook. But there is much more, of course, to it than this. Much, much more.
Well,
because
can I ask you?
Go ahead.
No. Okay, so you got, just to summarize. So Kosminski, I mean, I did my research before the show. He seems to be the standard go-to candidate now among kind of revisionists. But you're kind of revisionist against the revisionists because you're saying it.
Yes, and again, I stress this is not original from me.
No.
You find serious scholars, if you look at the Reddit site, many online, first-class online sites that study this, acknowledge this. And if you look at the work in particular of Holland and Sandbrook and other serious scholars too, they are very explicit about this. And even earlier scholars, very serious scholars, point out even against Kosminski, they acknowledge the earlier ambiguities. Why is he called Kosminski? Mark Feidel looks very closely.
Before you carry on, So is the main battle between among ripperologists? I mean, it's not the Duke of Clarence and all that. Is it between Kaminsky and Kosminski? Is that where it's at the moment?
In, yes, but having said that, one has to focus and clarify. There are admirable, serious ripperologists out there. The term itself sounds absurd. You know, it's like looking for little green men at the bottom of the garden. Well, I'm from Ireland. Uh, 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 why shouldn't there be races like leprechauns around? Serious scholars like Jacques Vallée talk about this in Passports and Magonia. That's another issue for another time. But ripperology at its best is actually a serious discipline. Professor Martin Fido taught regular history at major accredited universities and colleges, both in Britain and the United States. He really only got into ripperology in his latest years when he was more of a semi-retired or had more was more of a gentleman of leisure. But he was a serious, meticulous scholar, and most of the serious people who go into this are. But the whole issue of the Ripper is surrounded by this enormous mythos. And the mythos is ridiculous. The mythos is false. And it comes very late. And for you and I, as studiers of mythology, modern, manufactured, and spontaneously generated alike, this is a very important issue. When I first got interested in the case, well, as an Oxford student of history, of course I did, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the conventional wisdom, and what appeared to be the serious scholarship at the time, was it was a gentleman called Montague John Druitt, who was a barrister who fits the classic model of the Ripper, upper class gentleman, had been to an Oxford college, was a respected lawyer, an eminent figure, relatively eminent figure, and most of all was a talented amateur cricketer. And I loved this image because part of the theory was that he would go into the city of London, play games in local cricket pitches, and that night there would be a killing, you know? And actually the dates don't fit, and several of the definite killings he can definitely place elsewhere. He was eliminated more than half a century ago. But don't you love the idea that a respectable gentleman with a cravat, wearing a top hat, who was playing cricket, will hit a ball for six, win the game, and then go out and celebrate by some outrageous monstrosity against the innocent poor victims of Whitechapel?
It fits the idea of the
Exactly.
cruel British upper class person, you know, totally in control, charismatic, charming, successful, probably highly intelligent, and then deeply depraved. It's a sort of a two-faced person, you know, with a and I guess that model. I mean, you know, I didn't even know that name, but the description you're giving is like my vague image. There's so much that one doesn't know because I said it's a lifelong process of losing one's semi knowledge. I would say, you know, we have these half things that we half know in our popular culture, and
Exactly.
I thought that even though it's as you said, it's gone out of date among serious scholars for 50 years. So it's something I probably picked up
Ex
when I was 10 or something, and then it's kind of sits there for the next couple of decades, as is the case with all of us. Anyway, sorry. So carry on. Yeah.
No, please.
No, no. Well, I'm just curious. So Kaminsky versus Kosminski, and Kosminski, I would say in my research is the more popular revisionist alternative, and you're going one step further and saying Kaminsky. Can you just, before you carry on your narrative, just paint a distinction between them? How were they as like personalities, and what do we know about them?
That's the interesting. They both fit his personalities very well. Kosminski does not have a reputation as a maniac, but he was definitely unbalanced and unstable. He was a Polish Jewish immigrant. He threatened a young woman, it may have been his wife even, with a knife. He had a propensity to violence, but there is no hard evidence whatsoever to link him to the Ripper. None. He's in the right place at the right time, but he still goes free for another 2 years after 3 years after the killings stop. Why? And then when he is arrested, he lives till 1919. He does not fit the McNaughton principle. He's named because he is the name used by Sir Robert Anderson, and Sir Robert was speaking from memory, and Jewish names were a confusion to him. Two Polish Jews whose names start with K and end with Insky, more or less. He mixed it up. People do.
Mm.
As viewers of me on this podcast and other seminars I give, I look back at my trips of the tongue and I'm embarrassed. I'll call Biden Trump or Trump Biden, and I know who each of them are, but I'm an old guy. And unless I catch myself, even when I write, I'm somewhat dyslexic. I have to edit. Edit what I do. The personal computer is a blessing to me because you can correct your own misprints instantly and easily, as opposed to manual typewriters. Completely different. And that's what Sir Robert Anderson did. And that's what people put on the wrong track. This was not a deliberate cover up. Mm. This was Robert Anderson speaking in his memoirs decades later, writing openly without detailed papers in front of him. Right. An old man remembering the name 20 years later. And that's where the confusion came from.
Right. So Kosminski was, and he couldn't, just to style back a little bit, he wasn't jailed until 1891, and the murders stopped in 1888. So why were there not more murders until he was jailed? Well, this Kaminsky guy was jailed in 1888, and there were no more murders.
And there was a further point, and that several further points. But first, Kaminsky dies within a year, less than a year after he's put in jail, and he effectively commits suicide. Anderson writes that the killer died within a year and committed suicide. That is exactly the kind of detail you would expect someone to remember easily in memory when they are getting Jewish names that start with K and end with Insky. Confused. It fits. It fits. This is not again, I stress, this is not my brilliant discovery. Serious Ripper investigators and scholars have been documenting this for years. There is one more point that points towards Kosminski, although it's been debated.
Kaminsky. You just said Kosminski.
Sorry, again, that points away from Kaminsky and possibly towards the other one. You see, I'm getting the names confused too. Why shouldn't Sir Robert Anderson?
Okay, so the evidence points towards Kaminsky or Kosminski now.
Yes, exactly. It points to Kaminsky overwhelmingly.
Okay, no. So now you're going to say why it points to Kaminsky, because you said Kosminski there.
Yes.
Right.
Kaminsky has a much more explicit record of violence. He's a total lunatic. He's picked up on the streets, not just as an individual with a propensity to violence, which was Kosminski, but Kaminsky is, at first they don't even know who he is because he cannot tell them, because he's at least in English, he's incoherent. He's much more of an out-of-control maniac. First point, right? He's much more of an out-of-control maniac. And he's arrested. And he dies within a few months in jail. And this fits exactly what Robert Anderson correctly remembered. Robert Anderson even says he committed suicide in jail. In the lunatic asylum. And the evidence is explicit that he would not eat. He refused to eat. He was so violent, he is described as a menace to himself, and therefore had to be strapped down to prevent him killing himself or killing others. And remember, this is also not a touchy-feely, more humane 21st century kumbaya mental hospital or mental institution. This is a 19th century Imperial England Victorian lunatic asylum. It is a bedlam. It is a hellhole. The nurses and staff are not trained as modern doctors and nurses are trained. Lunatics are held down in any way possible. There is a certain satisfaction here in that a man guilty of such frightful and disgusting and monstrous crimes did at least die in a hellhole. I personally find that very emotionally satisfying. One takes far too many Nazi war criminals and communist mass murderers who died in their beds happily in their 90s with no quiver of conscience. One takes one's satisfaction in justice where one can get it in life. But back to your key point, the key point is Nathan Kaminsky fits these details. Kosminski does not. There is one pointer that points in Kosminski's direction that came out in 2015. Another serious and respected ripperologist comes up with a DNA test done on bloodstains found on the shawl of Catherine Eddowes, one of the victims of the Rippers 1, 2, and 1 night slaughters, and says the DNA that is found on the shawl matches descendants of the same family as Kosminski. Kosminski did not have children, but he had brothers and sisters, and they had children and grandchildren and descendants to this day who cooperated in the investigation. And there is a match, but the match is not 100%. Oh, this has to, pure proof match. It's very clear what it is. It could be a match, but it could also match thousands or tens of thousands of other people. They are genetic indicators, which were very common in Polish Jews and wider, I think, among Polish people in Poland at the time, but were very uncommon in the general English or more general population of England and London at that time. So it could be Kosminski. There's a vague connection, but it could also be from lots of other people. And there is also a case here of chain of evidence. We do a very crucial legal term. In chain of evidence, and you see this in all the good TV detective shows, the investigators, the forensic scientists find a hair, they find a tiny grain of sand, they immediately meticulously put it in a small plastic bag, they sign the plastic bag, there are witnesses to see it. There are chains of a procedure to guarantee that the evidence was not invented, or more likely just imagined, or is polluted by someone else handling it or touching it or accidentally misfiling it later on. Chain of evidence is a very important legal principle, and a lot of people who are guilty of sale have gotten off because the police were and the prosecutions in their cases in Britain, in North America, in other countries have been were not able to adequately document chain of evidence. Here again, there is a chain of evidence issue. We can roughly trace the listing of who owned Catherine Eddowes' shawl from the 1890s through to the 21st century, but that's a long time. And there are big, vague periods there too, when the shawl could have been mixed with someone else's, or something else could have been put on it. Mm-hmm. I tended to favor for a long time this. The point here is this is vague evidence. It is not definite evidence. And there is
it could presumably fit Kamiński as well. I mean, he was a Polish Jew, so...
Exactly. Yeah. But what I would suggest, and I don't know if this is possible, is I don't think it is possible, but I have never seen anywhere yet any reference to Kamiński having brothers and sisters who have descendants who can be reliably traced to this day. If we can find anyone who fits that pattern and is willing to cooperate just by offering their own DNA, but even then, we could run it also against what was found on Catherine Eddowes' shawl. And if the same indicators are either proven or even suggested, then Kosminski is off the hook and Kamiński was the guy. But there's another principle here, a crucial scientific principle from Albert Einstein himself. Einstein said, and this is why I don't just say it's Kamiński, it's Kamiński, it's Kamiński. This is why we discuss Kosminski as well. Albert Einstein says it is better to be generally right than precisely and accurately wrong. Mm. And I see this in historical studies too, and we see this in the Ripper case as well. People will come up with enormous mountains and superstructures of supposed evidence. Mm. I've seen people who accuse the Freemasons or the royal family or secret societies or black magic ritual cults, what have you, or the Hellfire Club. And they all point out, if you point the position from one murder to another murder and the third murder and the fourth murder, the movie From Hell, I think, may go into this. Johnny Depp plays Chief Inspector Abelline, who was a senior police officer in the case. And again, this is all fiction. In the movie, Johnny Depp tragically and heroically dies at the end of the movie. right? And Chief Inspector Abelard. The real Inspector Abelard had a long and appears to be happy and relatively contented life, and lived on and died in honored retirement. Nothing to do with the image tens of millions of people have gotten from the Johnny Depp movie at all. The Johnny Depp movie comes from a graphic novel written by a genius who I greatly admire, Alan Moore, who wrote the Watchmen movie and the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And much else. He's also a wild libertarian, and he wrote the V for Vendetta comic book.
With that Guy Fawkes face, which is
always that's the man.
The Guy Fawkes mask, which is also got this sweeping Ripper-esque persona somehow, you know.
Oh, completely. He was banned from entering the United States because of allegations of being involved in black magic.
Right.
Martin, sorry. He actually appears to be, from what I see of him, a highly moral figure in his own way, but that's a different story.
We got 8 minutes left. I mean, it's a beautifully described.
All these stories are myth.
Okay.
The Duke of Clarence
I get it.
had nothing to do with it.
The question that's been sort of building in my mind in this fantastic exposition is, okay, it's either Kosminski or more likely Kaminsky, but based on the police inspector's memoirs and reminiscences a few years later, and then later when he was retired. Fine. But apart from his memoirs, are there any other testimonies or investigations? I don't know. They didn't have DNA testing back then or whatever. But I mean, I don't know enough about the Ripper case, but I'm going to ask a really simple question. I mean, what do the witness testimonies say? Did they see the Jack the Ripper, and did he look like either of those two candidates, the Polish Jewish candidates?
The answer is yes. And again, this is in the police records of the time. There was one reliable witness, and he was a Polish Jew himself. And he privately identified the suspect, who we now, I believe to be Kaminsky, who was mislabeled as Kosminski for all those years. But he identified him to the police, but he refused to come forward as a witness against his own community because he feared his own community would ostracize him, but also because he was a persecuted Jew. And this is a key reason that the police and the British government kept what they knew under wraps at the time. They did not want anti-Semitic pogroms against Jews in general who were innocent sweeping England, because one man was a maniac and carried out these monstrous crimes, cutting out the organs from women's bodies right after he had killed them. That was why the police stayed quiet. First of all, old-fashioned Victorian legalism. They did not have a case in court. Secondly, they had him under wraps. There was no danger of him killing anyone else, which is the great argument for Kaminsky and against Aaron Kosminski. It's a crucial distinction between them. Crucial distinction. The police did not let him loose. He was under wraps. He died shortly afterwards. There was no danger to anyone else. And they could not bring a prosecution because they did not have witnesses at the time. But at the same time, they had actually solved the case. They knew had the man under wraps. They stayed on Ripper alert for a considerable period of time. And this is London in the 19th century. It's a highly violent city. There are sexual killings going on, if not all the time, at least very often. And there are many later cases which people implausibly say it must have been the Ripper. Well, no, they were not. And there are people who are suspected of being the Ripper from middle class and upper class backgrounds too, who may well have carried out other murders later, but do not fit the profile of being able to move in this time. One last crucially important point. All the killings are carried out in an extremely tiny area of only a few blocks. Why? A real predator with any brains and wit whatsoever would go on a wider area to get more vulnerable victims rather than stay in the most densely populated parts of the world at the time. He could not go further because he was impoverished, because he could not afford even a train fare. And this is pointed out by Sir Robert Anderson at the time. And there was a first-class FBI profile by the legendary FBI profiler John Douglas that doesn't name Kaminsky specifically. Kaminsky's name comes up years after. This was done nearly 30 years ago. But Douglas, who was a legendary profiler who helped catch many serial killers, specifies a man from 20 to 25, single, lived in the area, extremely poor, passed as anonymous because he was anonymous. All the details that fit Kaminsky are in John Douglas's profile of for the Federal Bureau of Investigation 30 years ago.
All right. Magnificent presentation, Martin. I just got one question. My others will probably come to me after the show, but I'll say, this Kaminsky guy, on what grounds did they arrest him then? What legal grounds did they have to arrest him?
They didn't arrest him as such. They detained him and put him in a lunatic asylum.
Oh, I see. It's a lunatic. I'd forgotten that. Yeah, yes, right.
But he was clearly, he is named in the Macnaghten Memorandum of 1895, right, which also names Montague John Druitt, incidentally. Right. But he is also named as mislabeled Kosminski, but he is named in the Macnaghten Memorandum of 1894, who was Sir Robert Anderson's successor as Assistant Commissioner of the London Police. Again, a man in a position to have overall knowledge, who came on board after well after the killings. But he's named as one of the three primary suspects.
Right.
Again, Anderson and Swanson, who actually ran the case, do not name him as one of the three primary suspects. They name him as the suspect. Right. So he was clearly arrested on the basis of evidence that he fitted what.
And this guy Kaminsky. A last comment from you, because we ran out of time.
Sure.
What did he look like? Do we have any photographs of him?
We don't have any photographs, no. But if you look up the different websites, you see reproductions of him. They tend to be misleading. The pictures, again, the power of image and fantasy. The Kaminsky picture looks much what we would expect him to like. He has a mustache. He's darkly sinister. The one picture that's always put, I think, from AI about Kaminsky actually shows him to be more like a respectable banker or businessman with a goatee beard and what have you. That's just absolute nonsense. It can't have been. And he wasn't photographed as far as we know.
Right.
If anyone can find or suggest photographs to us or say, you're wrong, this is the way he looked.
Martin,
please, folks.
What a fantastic story, and it's a tour de force monologue from you. Interesting all the way through it, totally gripping. So, folks, this is the TLDR. It wasn't an upper class toff who went and butchered lower class prostitutes after between trips to the gentleman's club, which I vaguely thought, through the
we all do.
Even I'm a myth hunter as myself. But there are always more myths to scotch, and it wasn't the sort of favored revisionist candidate. Aaron Kosminski. It was Nathan Kaminsky, another Polish Jew who the British police had early on, and you've made a very, very good case for that. So I guess all you listeners out there, you'll be Googling. Is there kind of cover up about this? I mean, when you Google the JFK case, they don't tell you the truth. It's always Lee Harvey Oswald acting because of anti-Semitism allegations and all the rest of it. Is it something that's easily found, or is there a pattern of political correctness?
No, the thing is, it's totally easily found. But people hypnotize themselves into political correctness. Oh, it can't have been a Jewish person, even though he was untypical of the Jewish community. That would be politically incorrect. That would be anti-Semitism. There's that kind of political correctness mental taboo. But it's open on the web. The best serious scholars, as I said, like Holland and Fido and Dominic Sandbrook, they discuss this rationally and openly.
Okay.
And fairly.
I'm afraid we've got to go there, Martin. Thank you so much. Great show. Thank you so much.